Hi, I'm Bob Moore, and today we're going to take a look at JSON, and we're going to look at consuming JSON from the Twitter Search API. We're going to look at consuming it both client-side using JavaScript and jQuery, and we're also going to take a look at processing the JSON results server-side using XBasic, and we'll be doing that in a separate video. So here we're using the Twitter Search API. You can go to Twitter's website on the development side and do a search for that, and you'll be able to see all the documentation for the Twitter Search API. Okay, here we're going to look at get search, and this would be a typical call, and this is all done in JSON. So what is JSON? Well, JSON is JavaScript object notation. It's a way of representing an object in JavaScript, and it turns out that it's really a great interchange format, basically replacing XML. It's very easy to understand, it's easy to read, and it's easy to parse. So it's used extensively through all of the different RESTful services and APIs on the internet. So we're going to be looking at consuming and processing JSON both client-side and server-side with Alpha 5. So here we are in Alpha 5. This is version 11. We're going to go ahead and jump into show tweets. And what I wanted to do was just let's start out taking a look at the controls that make it up. So it's just a dialog. It's got some static text. It's got a drop-down. It's got a text area. It's got a button. And let's take a look at what it does. So here it's gone out. Once we fired it up, by default looks for 25 of the latest tweets regarding the Red Sox. So that's what we've got here. I'm going to go ahead and ask for say 100 tweets that reference the Patriots. When I click on search, we notice the green button goes to red, and then once everything's done, it comes back to green, and here you'll see we've got 100 tweets presented. Now all of this is done with HTML. There's no magic here. This is done with CSS styling. We've got nice rounded corners on the icon and a drop shadow, and notice the alternate row shading, all done with CSS. So we just consume the JSON that's coming back from Twitter client side. We process it. We present it using proper CSS, and this is what we see. So let's take a look at how we do that. So we start out using the dialog component. You could do this in an HTML5 page, or an HTML page for that matter, but in this case I wanted to show the power of the new dialog component and showing that you can do things with it that you might not have even thought of. The nice thing about this is it encapsulates all the code. So now you could take this component, maybe you use it in a tabbed UI, or you could use it within any of the alpha components. So the first thing we do is we start out with just static text, and over here we're just defining a title. We're using an H2 tag for that. Over here we've got a drop-down box. This just identifies how many tweets we'd like, 5 through 100 there. And notice the variable name we're giving it is numRows. Twit search is a text box. This is where we can just enter in the search term. Again, the variable name twit search right over here is important. Now on the button, there's a couple of interesting things here. A couple of little tricks here that are nice to know about. Here we're actually entering an HTML for the text for the button. You can put anything in here you want. And here we are defining a div, an ID with B1, so for button 1. And then search, and then we're dropping in an image, and this is that green orb that you see. Now because it's in a div, we are going to be able to modify the source of this image, or in fact I think I replace all of the HTML in div B1. So that's how we do the swap out with the green and the red. In the frame itself, we've actually got HTML. Here we're defining a div ID of tdiv. This is going to allow us to replace again the text within this div, latest tweets for the Patriots, latest tweets for whoever you're searching for. Static text area, all this is defining an ID. So a div with an ID of twit list, and we're going to compute the HTML that actually appears in there, and that's going to be based on the JSON data that comes on back. So let's take a look at how we actually do that, and that's going to be with a JavaScript function. So here we are in our JavaScript functions, and the first thing I do is define a new alias for jQuery. I do this because Alpha's JavaScript library uses the $, which is the default jQuery alias. So I use the $JQ so I don't have to type out jQuery everywhere we go. And then let's take a look at the getTweets function. So the two parameters that we're passing in are search string and row count. If you do not supply them, if they're undefined, we're going to put in some defaults. So here we put in Red Sox, or we'll put in a row count of 25 if you don't submit anything. So that's a way that you can just set up some default values for those parameters if they're not supplied. From there we do a jQuery AJAX call. If you'd like more information on jQuery, just go to their website. They have very, very good documentation. There's a ton of help available. So here for the URL, we're specifying the search twitter.com. We're passing in the parameter search string and row count, asking for a return type of JSONP. This is the function that will fire on success. Notice I'm using the underbar JSON here. This is the object that's going to come back with all of the information that we need. Then here I'm just using some standard jQuery. I'm number one, removing a full list of unordered list of items if it's there. So that just cleans the list out if it was there previously. Then we append those two tags back on in. Here we set up a jQuery object that we can use later on, and we're going to use that, and we actually use it right down here when we append within the unordered list tags. We're going to add a list item along with some computed HTML and then a closing tag. Then you'll notice right here, this is where all the magic happens. So here we're going to step through each one of the results that came back. And so we have this underbar JSON dot results, which we're going to go through, and then we're going to start picking apart the different items in there. So here we set up a variable called HTML. We start adding in just basic HTML. Here we're setting up an image class called tIcon, setting up the source to be, now the source is one of our items that's part of the JSON string coming back. So, and these particular names are all defined within the Twitter API. So here we have profile underbar image underbar URL. Notice that our prefix is underbar JSON dot results and then key. So we're going to, because we're stepping through every single item, and you're gonna see that throughout this. This is really a template is what it is. So here for the body, we're putting in the results of .text, which is the body of the tweet. And you can follow the same pattern on through, or pulling information, who is it from, when was it created, that kind of thing. And then we simply append it as a list item. That's what we're doing right here. And this last item, what it's going to do is simply replace the HTML of the B1 div with the green orb. So it will just change that red orb back to green when we're all done. So that is that's the magic of the getTweets function. Now let's go take a look at some of the other properties associated with the dialog component here. It's important to look at the CSS, so I'm going to look at the code associated with that. If you're not up to speed on CSS, I suggest that you do get up to speed on it. This is pretty simple stuff here. Here we're referencing the image and then the class of T underbar icon. This is the thumbnail icon that we're making sure it's 48 by 48 by default. It should be, but not all of the clients actually size it, and it appears that Twitter doesn't really care. They'll display anything. So I mean, I've seen some huge icons come back. So this is just kind safety measure to make sure that they're only 48 by 48, and we're dropping in a margin to just kind of pull it off the page a little bit, giving it a nice little border radius and a box shadow. Now notice here I'm not using any of the prefixes that you would typically see, like WebKit or any of those kinds of things. Most of the modern browsers now will just understand, oh, it's a border radius or it's a box shadow. This vertical align is important. You can take it out and see what it does, but that helps to align the text. And then we just float it left. And then we've got different styling information associated with the button, and this is actually how we change the colors for the odd and even rows. Real simple, one line of code. This is all going to require a modern browser because this is all CSS3 stuff, and just some other basic styling, and that's all we really need to do. We'll be using this same CSS when we process all this information server side as well. Let's see if there's anything else of interest in here. Oh, there's a head section tag. I just put it in there to just make sure that we're defining UTF-8 characters. That's so that the information that comes back from Twitter it displays the way we'd like it to. They're going to support UTF-8. Client-side events. We've only got one. On initialize complete, we call get tweets. Notice that we haven't submitted any parameters here, and the reason for that is that we know that the defaults are going to be set, so we're happy with that. So that's about all there is to it, and you can see it's very fast. And here again, we'll search for somebody in the news recently. That's Elon Musk. So here's our latest information on Elon. So I hope you found this interesting. I hope you learned a few things from it, and we'll carry this forward looking at the server-side processing of JSON. Thanks so much.